Morning, and thank you everyone for um, participating this morning to have this conversation. I think Jane had set the tone well. The notion of education has not only been a topic in the city of St. Louis, but obviously in Jefferson City as well, as bills are being debated. We talk about a number of things that deal with education. I just got off a call with Kansas City School District as they talk about education there as well. So I think it's aligned to what's happening across the state specifically. And so the conversation this morning is really a conversation around some decisions that the board made relative to the school consolidation. First question is why? Why did we have to make these decisions? I know one of the mayoral candidates indicated that the district has a really robust budget, or at least surplus of about $100 million. And this is, as I said to the public, and I said to you, this is less about money and more about the long-term idea of what needs to happen for public education in the city of St. Louis. You can see the numbers are before you. In 2007 and 8, the year before I arrived, there was 60,642 students. In 2018-19, 2 years ago, there were about 45,919 students. And that number, quite frankly, is lower today than it was at that point in time. And you can see on the other side that there are more schools today than there were in 2007, which means that we've closed 40-something schools. Charters have closed about 13 schools, but still, even with that, there are 110 schools, LEAs that are schools that are existing in the city of St. Louis right now. So the numbers just don't make sense. And so the really question becomes, how can we allocate more funds to students, not buildings and maintenance? And so that's why the board made the decision. Looking at the picture of what's going to happen moving forward, the board had to make some kind of decisions. Where did it start? In 2020, the spring, over 700 community members came together. The board, along with the foundation, quite frankly, contracted with Emerging Wisdom to lead this effort as an outside party to lead these conversations across the community. In 2020, in the spring, obviously, the COVID hit, and the board paused the conversation. In October to December, they resumed the conversation with the community. And then in January, they voted to close 7 schools when 11 schools were listed to be closed. And a decision will be made about the historical Sumner School at the March 9th board meeting to try to look at what needs to happen. But this is really not about closing buildings, but about how we take the resources that were aligned to these schools to really do what's next. And that's kind of what the next chapter really talks about. What it means for me is, and for the public and the community, is increased dollars at the school site to support schools, about 15% more discretionary dollars that schools have, and an overall budget increase. Improved social and emotional supports. What does that mean? Full-time nurses in every building, not part-time. Full-time counselors in every building, not part-time. The re-engagement of social workers such that there are more social work services. But the challenge for us is that we don't have full-time there because we can't find enough social workers. The trauma-informed therapy and consultants, family community specialists, those persons who link with the families full-time in every one of our schools, not just in some of our schools. Additional reading instruction. It is no doubt that challenge for us around reading is real. And so what we're looking to do is have additional reading support. And I know that Ms. Crapo and Dr. Knight are going to talk a little bit about that. And so I won't get too much into that. More robust high school options. Right now, more AP courses for students. I think the numbers that we're looking at is about 25% more options for kids in our high schools because we're closing 2 high schools and some of those services are going to go to other schools. And this whole notion of equitable practices. This notion of making sure that we have enough resources distributed to address the issue of equity, as Mrs. Donahue talked about. Tomorrow's students will be talking about this notion of equity and what it means to schools and how it can be better supported. Assistance with families impacted their placement in their top choice schools. So what we've done is we're working with families. I think at this point in time, about 80% of families have been placed in other schools that want to go. And long-term planning for citywide system and planning. This is what I'm really excited about, this notion that the community is saying we need to be talking about what happens long-term, because the decision we made in the last 60 days will be a decision that will be made over and over and over again, unless there's some real plan. And I'm really excited about the idea that enough parties in this city want to have that conversation. Mayoral candidates want to have that conversation. Automatic persons want to have that conversation. And quite frankly, charter leaders want to have that conversation as well. So I'm really excited about what might happen in that space. So that's really what the next chapter kind of looks like. I think at this point in time, as Donahue will be turning it over to Are we turning it over yet at this point?
Dr. Adams gave you kind of an overview. Oops, I'm muted. I'm sorry, hold on one second.
We can hear you, Jane. You're good.
Oh, okay. Don't mute me. So Dr. Adams kind of did an overview, and we'll be able to dive into that a bit more with questions. But we also wanted to let you know and have you meet a few of our district leaders that are working on these specific efforts. So first up, we're going to hear from Dr. Paula Knight, who's our Chief Academic Officer, and Claire Crapo, who is Director of Special Projects in the Academics Office. And they've been working hard thinking about how to ensure more of our kids get exactly the one-on-one kind of help they need to be the best possible readers.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So as Dr. Adams and Ms. Donahue indicated, we have taken an intentional approach around reading. We know that reading, language arts, writing, all of those three components are intertwined, but it supports this whole plan around reading. Going into the next school year, as well as this second semester, we are trumpeting our plan around reading, having an intense focus around how we teach reading, how we are providing comprehensive professional development to our teachers around reading. And as part of the upgrade plan for the next school year, our superintendent has allowed us to continue to move forward with identifying reading teachers within our elementary buildings. And so we are really excited about that because that is where the intense focus and support for children really will take place and really rocket into increased student achievement. Before I turn it over to Claire, Dr. Crapo, to really talk about what we are actually doing this semester and going into the next school year, I just want to continue to remind us around how we are looking at the data to determine children who are reading on level. We have grade equivalencies that specifically says if a child is reading based on his or her grade level. But we also want to look at the data from a growth perspective. How are children growing over time? And we do have that data that supports how children are growing from year to year within grade level over time. And a lot of that has to do with having an intentional focus around how we are actually teaching reading. Dr. Crapo?
Sure, thanks, Dr. Knight. And I'm glad Dr. Knight brought up, how we're looking at data, because one thing that we want to share that we're really proud to share with you all is that our students have continued to make growth in reading at what we would expect them to make over the course of the year. And the reason why I want to highlight that is, you probably don't always get to hear that. Especially, I think there's sometimes maybe a different narrative that's going on, but especially we're really proud that our students have continued to show an upward trajectory of growth, because really during the pandemic, educational experts across the country and really across the world said to educators, you may see a slide in students' data and how students are progressing in reading. And one of the things that we're really proud of, and I think it speaks to the hard work of our teachers, to the dedication of our students, is that we didn't see sort of the COVID slide that a lot of people predicted would happen. Instead, we actually saw our kids continue to make the upward trajectory. And so looking to next year, we're really looking to sort of enhance the improvements that we've already made. And so like Dr. Knight was sharing, the thing that we're the most excited about is adding reading teachers to approximately 30 elementary schools next year to work with our second and third graders. We've done some of this work before at a smaller scale, and we have seen the impact that it has when students have a dedicated individual in their building who is supporting them with reading, either on a one-to-one basis or on a small group basis. I think just as adults, we do better when we're in small groups as well. And so our kids who need the most support, we see that same growth. And so we're really scaling this effort up. And I think you can think about the impact of that. Instead of having it at 2 or 3 schools, we're now going to have about 30 schools who have this additional staff member to work with a targeted group of students. We're focusing on around 3rd grade. And I want to talk about why 3rd grade, because I think sometimes people have questions about that. We're looking at 3rd grade because that's really the year where students are transitioning from learning to read to reading to learn. And so we really want to make sure that students, who potentially potentially have some foundational skills that are missing, we get them caught up in that 3rd grade year before there are bigger gaps. And like I was saying earlier, you know, we have evidence and we have proof that this works for students. And so we are, you know, I think it's going to be a game changer for us to have these additional staff members in our building to support our struggling students in reading. And then I think Dr. Knight is going to talk one more piece about we're adding in some additional curriculum and training around anti-bias and anti-racism.
Thank you, Dr. Crapo. We put a curriculum together for this school year around anti-bias, anti-racism, really highlighting the importance and the value around student voice. With all of the upheaval, change, community impact that has taken place over the last, quite frankly, over the last year, we made an internal decision supported by our superintendent to really ensure that we are taking a stronger focus around student voice and having a curriculum that really speaks to that. Over the last 2 years, we've really been working around this whole notion of equity. And as Dr. Adams has said, as I continue to say and continue to remind others, this is not just about the word equity, but really examining what it means to be an equitable district, equitable distribution of resources, as well as our practice. And we created this curriculum that really speaks to the how we actually do that. And getting us to a place where equitable practice becomes just part of the fabric of what we do. And we don't have to feel as if we're asking ourselves, are we being equitable? But we know that with every decision that we are making, we are ensuring that voice is a part of this work. Those who are deemed as the most marginalized group of people, as well as our families, are at the table when we are having these kinds of conversations. Tomorrow, I'm proud to say, we are having our first ABAR mini conference / speaker series, where we will have students who will be leading sessions, as well as members of the ABAR equity team. And we will have those breakout sessions. So it will be a filled morning. It will be a really rich day around having those conversations around equitable practice, anti-bias, as well as anti-racism, and being able to see the evidence based on the first semester of the rollout of this curriculum. We are highlighting, our speaker will be Dr. Erica Armstrong Dunbar, who you may recognize her work from. She's a nationally recognized historian and professor. She does have a book that's coming out, Never Caught, and she's highlighted on 60 Minutes. And so we are really excited to have Dr. Armstrong with us tomorrow, and really excited that we have the community that's also supporting this ABAR work with our first speaker series conference tomorrow from 9 to 12.
Thank you, Dr. Knight. And I know that Stacy Clay is on the line, and I want to just give a shout out to First Bank, because they are one of the main partners for supporting our work in this ABAR curriculum this year. So thank you to Stacy. And after this event, we'll send you a link in case you want to be on Zoom tomorrow morning as well. We'll send you a link for participating in that conference. We're going to transition over to hearing from Megan Marietta, who's our manager of social work services here at the district. And you'll see on each of these slides coming up, there's this part about how does this particular expanded service that SLPS is proposing for next year fit into what we learned from numerous community visioning sessions and what we heard from the community. And one of the things we heard a lot from the community as the district was thinking about what could be more for students was just a demand for more social emotional support services for students. And so Ms. Marietta is gonna talk a bit about that, and know that it's a real effort to try to respond to what we've heard from families in the community about school culture.
Good morning, and thank you for having me this morning, Jane. And thank you all for your support of the foundation, because truly without the support of the foundation, the bulk of my work surrounding social emotional supports, trauma-informed practices and efforts in the district, they would really be even more challenging than they already are. And as Jane said, this is an area of focus that the district really began thinking about last school year, including some additional trainings and supports for schools, looking at social worker practices. How could we shift some responsibilities in order to free up some of their time to focus on mental health supports for students? And one of the things that the district did last year was create a collaborative intervention team comprised of 2 licensed clinical social workers who are able to respond to schools on an individual school level. And the needs that the schools present could range from universal supports, looking at culture and climate in the school building, to practices surrounding supports for students and interventions, to individual student concerns. So when a school feels like they have maximized efforts and interventions around social emotional well-being for students but are still feeling lost, they can call in this team for an additional layer of support, consultation, recommendations, and assistance with intervention implementation. And that really has kicked off this idea of additional layers of support, not only for students, but for school staff as well. And as you heard Dr. Adams say at the beginning, is that also we are now expanding services in other areas of health and wellness to include full-time nurses in all of our buildings. They are an instrumental part of our student support teams when we're looking at why are students not in school? What are some of the barriers that we have from families in terms of engagement fully in a child's educational system? And so looking at those nurses and being full-time in the buildings, they will be able to assist the student support team and the whole school staff in looking at those medical issues that are barriers for our students and any other health concerns. Often we know that mental health can be displayed through physical health symptomology. And so having those nurses in the building to assist with those instances will be crucial. Same with our full-time counselors and family community support specialists. Again, it's just another arm of how do we increase support? How do we increase that engagement with families? And so our family community support specialists will be able to take on additional roles and including families and caregivers into their child's education. And when we're looking at districts' practices around trauma-informed cultures or trauma-informed practices, this is something that we continue to be committed to, not only as a district, but also working with individual schools. We continue to have a collaborative through the foundation. We were able to receive funding through the Missouri Foundation for Health, where we have been working with about 20 schools over the last few years on their journey to become trauma-informed. And through partnership with the foundation, the district is looking at additional funding to continue those efforts. And so as we are planning for next year, we are already shifting some of those ideas of how do we focus on individualized departments in the district, one department at a time, to provide them consultation and training to become trauma-informed as well, so that the school's efforts are supported and backed by the district as a whole. And so we will continue to work with schools on an individual level next year as well, so that they can receive training and consultation to support their journey to become trauma-informed. As we're looking at the social workers and what their roles are, and as you heard Dr. Adams say, we are not expanding social workers to one for every school for next year. Maybe that will happen somewhere down the line, but for right now, we're not doing that. And what we are doing though is expanding what roles they provide or serve to our students and families. And so we have made great efforts and have had a lot of focus on expanding their toolboxes. So we have had social workers participate in resilience and coping intervention, which is a group modality to really strengthen students and staff's capacity for coping and resiliency. We are in the process. We had half of the department already participate the last week, and the rest of the department is coming up in April, where we are participating in comprehensive grief group training, so that we will be able to offer grief and loss groups to students. The goal on that will eventually be able to expand that out to offer that to every member of the family, and to be able to have grief groups at our school sites, potentially in the evenings, where the whole family can participate and benefit from that service. We've also participated in other group modalities, such as cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in schools, and are looking at additional curricula for next school year, including just self-efficacy, skill building, emotional regulation and identification, and then just healthy relationships, how to create healthy relationships and maintain those relationships as well. Also, some really cool things happening around staff wellness. I talked about that resilience and coping intervention group. That is not just for students. We have been able to offer that group to staff and have been able to push into school networks upon their request, where we've been working with an entire networks building leadership teams, and then have also been pushing into individual schools where they have asked for that support for their staff. And really that group, again, is really, the purpose is to identify coping strategies and to build resiliency. And we know that staff have experienced a lot this past year, so wanting to offer that to them. And then the last thing, which is so exciting, in partnership with the foundation, we were able to secure some funding to bring yoga and mindfulness to the district. And so we have identified 2 schools for this year that we are providing yoga and mindfulness to 3 classrooms at each building for their students, as well as separate classes for the staff. And the neat thing is that usually when staff participate, there's this expectation of staff, you're learning this so that you can then go back and teach it to your students. With this though, this support is purely for them. There is no expectation that they then take those skills and relay them to other folks. It is really for their health. And we are getting ready to kick off Mindful March, again, through collaboration with the foundation and some other community partners and providers. We are going to be hosting district-wide yoga and mindfulness. We are already engaged in a 16-week curriculum district-wide, but are also now going to be shifting and adding more opportunities for staff to practice those skills with 5 to 10 minute yoga and mindfulness practice videos, just mindful moments. So getting ready to kick off that initiative with the support of the Office of Institutional Advancement and the foundation to really involve all staff in that. I'm looking at other ways for next year of how do we continue this idea of not just equity and for our students, but for staff as well, and really getting at the heart of that with having staff and students really strongly identify a sense of belonging to SLPS. So that's our focus for next year.
Thank you so much, Megan. And one thing to remember about our staff is that many of them are working mothers predominantly. So, you know, while they are trying to make sure that our students are learning and feeling good about life in this strange time, they also have that double role of doing that at home as well. So this new focus on staff wellness is huge. Last one that we're going to sort of do a deep dive into is, or a semi-deep dive, is what we're doing for our high school students. We're going to hear from Beth Bender, who is our Associate Director or Associate Superintendent for College and Career Readiness. She's also a former high school principal, and she knows well the challenges that have existed for the district because we operate either 12 or 13 high schools. It has meant that many of our high school students aren't getting the most robust experience that they truly deserve. So, you know, if they want to be on the cheer team and they want to take AP computer science, those 2 things might exist at 2 different high schools. But what we're hoping with this consolidation is more options for high school students. And Beth, or Dr. Bender, I'll have you talk about that.
Great, thank you. One of the huge goals of the Office of College and Career Readiness, as well as the district, is that when our students graduate, you know, 20 years ago, it was just get the kids across the stage. Now we have a much stronger calling. It's are our students, when they leave us, college and career ready? Do they have an idea of what they want to do? Do they have an idea of how to get there? And we've got a lot of great folks working with that and to make that happen. You know, the superintendent has given us a very strong and clear vision as we are in this time of transition with the district. You know, what can we increase? How can we expand? How do we give deeper, richer experiences to our students? And consolidation is really allowing us to do that. Smaller schools, and as our office has served, you know, 13, 14 high schools, it's difficult. And we felt at times that it's very superficial and we're not as deep as we'd like. You know, small schools mean less staff, which means less electives, which means less opportunity for AP classes or dual credit, less staff members, maybe to lead clubs or to coach sports or to stay after to tutor. So by reducing our number of schools, it really is allowing us to really emphasize more that push on equity and how do we make sure that regardless of what school you're at, you have deeper, richer opportunities. And that has just been key. One of the other areas, and it's a big project, we are starting next year, is our Senior Learn and Earn program. When our students graduate, as I said, it's not just about, do you have your credits? What are you doing next? We want our students to have those necessary soft skills that when people get our graduates in their employ, that they're like, wow, this kid is on it. You know, they know about timeliness. They know about communication. They know how to deal with difficult people. That is a real challenge in workplaces. They know what and when to use that phone that everyone is so attached to. And that's a big challenge for teenagers. They also, not only the soft skills, which I prefer to call necessary skills, but career awareness. We work from lower grades all the way up, trying to make sure students are exposed to careers, career opportunities, and that's difficult. If you live in a community where no one is an engineer, you have no relatives who are an engineer, there's not a lot of engineers on TV shows, it limits one's ability to dream and to understand. So we really have taken that on. How can we expand students' awareness and experiences? Work experience is also another really big area that the superintendent has asked us to focus on. When students go for a job, one of the things they're often asked is, what is your experience? Well, there's always got to be that first job. And the more experience you have, the more you can build, the better you are. So our Learn and Earn program is going to help our students kind of build that. And I'll explain that part. The other really kind of last item that has pushed us with the Learn and Earn is we have many students who need to work. There are students who, you know, I want to work so I can get some new tennis shoes or so I can buy, you know, the latest book or game or something or go somewhere. But there are quite a few students who are also kicking into the family's bills. And that money can really be a game changer for that student and the family. So wrapping all of those things into a package, and how do we make sure when our students walk out our doors and they cross that stage that they can move on gracefully, transition easily and successfully. So the Senior Learn and Earn program, and Jane and a number of others around here have been terrific partners because this is a big project. So next spring, we are going to have seniors out more than we've ever had. We've always had, you know, CTE, career and technical ed students go out on internships in the spring. Collegiate School of Science and Biomedicine, their kids have gone out. We've never been able to compensate them for that. And that's kind of on our wish list. We would like to be able to say, you're out doing this, but we also want to be able to help you economically a bit. So that is one tier of our program. A second tier is a program many of you may know from when you were in school. Our program is called Supervised Work Experience. So a student is in a business class, they go out and they get their own job. So I get a job at Schnucks. I bring my, information into my business teacher, show them I'm working 20 hours a week at Schnucks. The students then are allowed, if their schedule permits, to have reduced class numbers because they're earning credit while they work and they're getting paid. A really nice bonus for a lot of our kids. So that's the second tier of this program. The third tier, the great unknown that can wake me up at nights at times, and Jane is smiling because she's deep in this with me, is students who are not in CTE, but who would like to have a paid work or internship experience. They're going to have to be game on with their credits. So as a senior, usually senior year, spring semester, if everything's gone right, the only required course should be an English class. So a student who has done all of that and is game on and is like, I really want to get out there and work, I need to work. We are in the present point soliciting outside partner. We've got an RFP out and looking for them to come in to assist us to help find internships and paid jobs for our students, as well as being able to pay that first tier and that last tier of students. It's really important, for a student to be able to go somewhere, and we'll survey the students and try to put them in. If I want to learn about what an accountant does, I'm not really sure, I've taken some business classes. Can we get them in a place where they will see that, where they will experience that, where they will hopefully build a network? We're really excited for that option to come about. This work is not only a really big challenge and very needed, and I think light years ahead of many other districts, it really can be life-changing. And that's what we want to make sure happens. If we have students that go on and they are successful, that can be a turning point for that whole family, educationally, economically. So we're pushing this. We are excited with consolidation. As I said, we are allowed to go deeper. We are going to be able to offer more AP classes, and then this internship and work experience program really should be exciting. Right now we're still in the kind of stage, but next year at this time, I think we're just going to be smiling big and really proud of our kids and our community. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Beth. So you've heard a bit about what some of the plans for next year are. And now I think what we want to do is open it up for just some conversation and questions with you all. One of the questions I hope you ask Dr. Adams is, he referenced this at the beginning, but this idea of working on a citywide plan for all of the schools in the city, all of the public schools, both charters and district schools, even parochial and independent schools, to come up with a plan so that we can make the most of the resources that exist for all students, instead of having multiple bus routes and multiple ways of training principals and multiple this and multiple that. So he'll talk more about that if you ask him a question about that. So I'm going to stop the PowerPoint